And we'd like to hear perhaps if anyone has any views to share with us or any questions they want to ask us, we'd be delighted to hear them from you. Yeah.
Hi. So in the late 1980s to 1990s, there was a strand of science fiction going by the name of cyberpunk, which was heavily kind of dystopian themes. You had sort of a breakdown of society, you had technology used by organised crime groups, you had a whole range of kind of dystopian themes. I mean, is that something that you think is sort of fits within this genre of things we're discussing?
You said it's called cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk.
I'm sure
yes.
the 19th century didn't think of that term, but that's fascinating. But Martin,
No, I think you said the 90s, the 1990s.
Oh, the 90s. Oh, sorry. I thought you said the 19th century.
The idea of cyberpunk in the 19th century. I think if you apply the 30-year rule, I don't know if this is a crazy thing that we were thinking about, then that's going to be 2020, isn't it? And it doesn't take much of a leap. So I think it definitely passes that test, doesn't it? And I think it's like when suddenly in the 60s and 70s they suddenly decided that because of a lot of what had been said in Cambridge, how in the 30s about how D.H. Lawrence was suddenly the greatest novelist ever. They had this sort of thing for about 20 years, though it's not perhaps so much now. So if you've ever worked your way through the rainbow, you'll probably understand why that is. But what in answer to your question, I think that dystopia as it develops, I think cyberpunk is going to prove a very important part, and I think it isn't getting the accolades, because there is this thing about rubbishing science fiction that really annoys me, and I'm sure anyone who loves science fiction has read. If you read H.G. Wells, they think this guy's writing science fiction before the First World War. How on earth did he have that imagination? And of course, as you say, you then get to cyberpunk 100 years later. Why shouldn't that be the same? But I think it hasn't had its moment yet. I don't know when that moment will come, but I would certainly embrace it and that include it in part of that.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, there was a famous cyberpunk novel that kind of kick-started the genre called Neuromancer by William Gibson. And every year since its launch, there's a group who are reviewing it against the current state of technology now. And each year we're getting more and more of the supposedly outlandish things that this book talks about are becoming parts of our daily lives.
Sorry, who was the author?
William Gibson.
I was going to say, it does feel for me that this has been a huge omission in our talk, and I would thank you for putting it in at the end, because I think you're absolutely correct.
And we're not due to talk about it for another 20 years.
I'm interested in the themes of surveillance and how this, particularly the book you talked about in the Glass Houses in 1984. There's another book called The Circle, which talks a little bit about a sort of dystopian view of sort of Google, Facebook world, and people going transparent by wearing cameras 24 hours a day. Just wondered whether you had any thoughts about security, surveillance, and sort of, the laws around that balance between privacy and security, whether that is feeding into potentially supporting it.
Picking on from what you said, that have you ever been passed by one of people riding bikes who have those cameras on their helmets?
Yeah.
And you're thinking, why would a cyclist have a camera on their helmet? What is this, some kind of insurance gimmick for whiplash later on? Yeah, I did. Didn't you see the camera go back? Or is it Google Earth or something?
I think that bureaucracy will inevitably want to actually increase surveillance, because why wouldn't it? If you're doing your job of wanting to surveil, then you would certainly want to make yourself as efficient as possible. That's what you're targeted on. So I think there's just a natural impetus by the state to want to see the kind of surveillance society created. Obviously, it's for us to decide how much of that surveillance we want to accept. But then you have this debate, and then you can sometimes have what they call a casus belli, as it were, for the thing to occur, something that makes us all scared, some alleged events which might then be used to create the kind of surveillance society that we would otherwise complain of, but they would in all cases want to see imposed on us. So yeah, it is a tricky one, but that's why we need to have our politicians clear about what they're allowed and not allowed to do.
I do want to add something to that. I was a teacher in Sutton, and Sutton, one time, Sutton, Surrey, if any of you know, it's still Sutton, Surrey, even if you don't know, but there is this mile high street, the Mile High Street, that became, any of you know about this, the mate of mine who worked, when I used to work for the youth offending team, one of my mates was one of the guys in charge of some of the more difficult clients, they used to call them, I think they still do, in Sutton, and he told me all about this mile, which actually is, I think this answers a lot of the question, because we're talking about fact something. This is about 7 years ago, so goodness only knows what it's like now. But this was the most policed mile in the world. That's even in America, anywhere. And he said, do you know what's the strangest thing about it? And I said, well, that's as strange as it gets, surely. No, he said, there's something even more stranger. Those cameras are not watched by anyone. Just record. They're completely reactive. They're only there after something's happened. Oh, there was a fight there. Oh, quickly, get the... We haven't worked them out yet. No, we haven't. Someone, let's see, what happened on Saturday? Oh, yes, got them. Well, yeah, you've got them. But if the point is, nobody's got the money to actually have someone sitting on there. I couldn't believe that. He said it's true. It's true, I can promise you. It's one of the biggest jokes in the police station is that we've got all this fantastic equipment, and yet they won't give anybody the job of sitting in on the cameras. And when there are operations and things like that, then obviously they then go to these specific cameras. But here it is, the most policed mile in the world, but it's only policed by cameras, not by human beings. So I suppose there's a novel.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but the lady there, I think.
Yeah, I was going to recommend more recent Margaret Atwood books, Oryx and Crake. Have you read those?
I would always say, I'm sure you'd agree with me, start with Handmaid's Tale. But yeah, once you've read Handmaid's Tale, if you don't read every book she's written, then I'd be amazed. that for me, I mean, I'm doing a bit of a sales pitch for it here. I don't have any relatives in Virago, I promise you. Well, it's not Virago, it's Virago Classic. But you know, read Atwood, you'll buy it, you'll look at everything.
And what's frightening about Oryx and Crake is that it's so believable. She's just carried on the concept of gated housing estates and technological developments in how using genes and so on. And there are these two, there's the underclass and the people who are in charge, and it's just terrifying. Really good book.
But another way of looking at it is in fact that they're different labels for what we already have, and that's the way.
Yeah.
She's so credible.
We find ourselves at nearly 1:15, so perhaps maybe anyone got a quick question they want to ask?
This is a question from Martin. I was just wondering if for your research for your book, have you read Herland, which is a utopian novel, which is a utopia that has only women in it, and these men come along and the women are really cruel to them.
Who's the writer?
I actually can't remember. It's really old. It was written in the 17th century. It's really, really old and very short. But it just reminds me.
Herland, all one word.
Yeah, it's a German. It's translated from German.
Do you know what the original German title was? I mean, if it's translated. Sorry.
You sure it wasn't Hairland? There was like a last question over there, gentlemen.
Thank you. I think I will be looking at it.
Quickie, following on from that, actually, that just, I don't read a lot, perhaps there are lots of them, but it's just interesting going back to utopia and dystopia. Why do we write more dystopian novels than utopian novels? And is it more difficult to write a utopian novel than a dystopian?
It's fundamentally because utopia is a kind of state of mind. There's not much of a plot in utopia, you just kind of sit there, that seems to be the impression. But there's no plot without dystopia.
Sorry? You can imagine a utopia, something different. But I was just fascinated. I love dystopian novels, but
the problem is that any society has to be run by people, and that's the problem. My friend used to say, I love America, but it's not American.
And finally, remember Tolstoy, there's a million tragedies and only one happy story. How long can we keep writing about the happy story? We've got to see the other bits. So, Martin, do you want to thank everybody?
Yeah, please. Thank you very much for coming, and we hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope from my side of it.
Thanks very much, everybody, for coming.